Monday. Welcome back to Beyond the Briefing. It is Monday, August 19th. A lot to get to today. We're going to go through the midterm update. A little to talk about immigration in case you haven't heard. There's some folks that were taking a little trip through Martha's Vineyard. We'll talk about that. Update on the Trump special master case. Obviously, we get to the media. Mondays are always so good because of the Sunday shows. And then do want to touch on inflation at the end. All right, let's get to midterms. We had the last three states, Delaware, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, vote last week. Touched on this a bit. Nothing really happened in Delaware. Although I will say this, the one thing that happened in Delaware, they had a state auditor race. That was the only big race on the Dem side. This current state auditor has had some ethical issues, let's say. And so there was a primary, and the President of the United States flew home to vote last Tuesday. Now, here's the kicker. Delaware has had early voting for a long time. He was home the previous Friday. He landed at 4 o'clock. Polls are open till 7. He could have voted Friday. He was home all day Saturday. Polls were open. He didn't vote in person either time. He could have voted by absentee. Didn't vote. The question you have to ask yourself is why? And I just think it was pure incompetence. I think his political team and his scheduling team dropped the ball. That's what I think. When asked about it, Corinne Jean-Pierre said he has a tight schedule. I'm like, tight schedule? He landed, had nothing to do for 3 hours on that Friday before the election. He had all day Saturday with nothing on his schedule. This had nothing to do with schedule. He could have voted absentee. That's one box that he had to check, and then somebody would have put him in the mail for him. But that was just not true. That wasn't the issue. And so think about how much money was wasted doing this. Think about how bad, quote unquote, it was for the environment to fly Air Force One and have a huge motorcade. I mean, so I just say that because the one thing coming out of Delaware was just a ton of hypocrisy. In New Hampshire, 3 big races there. The governor, Sununu, was technically at a primary. And when I say technically, primaries are always important to keep an eye on, but he got out of that fine. He will coast to re-election. He widely liked in New Hampshire. Senate primary, Don Bullock became the Senate nominee. Interesting. There was this whole controversy over whether he was too, quote unquote, extreme. He was up against a guy named Morse, and there's no data whatsoever to show that either one of them would fare any better than against Maggie Hassan, who is the current Democratic senator. So this is just a complete made-up controversy by a bunch of folks in the media about who was nominated there. I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. Definitely one to keep on the radar because I think most folks in New England just the inflation stuff, the cost of heating your home is gone way up, and it's something that they're particularly sensitive to. So I would keep an eye on that race. And then obviously in the first congressional district, this was really interesting because we had both candidates on the show who were leading the race. There's several in this race to take on Democratic incumbent Chris Pappas. Matt Mowers had been the nominee last cycle. He was facing 25-year-old former press assistant Caroline Levitt. And she came up like a rocket and just crushed him. It was interesting. I mean, you could watch it happen. She was taking pot shots at him. Very heavy presence on conservative media, including Newsmax and other stations. She had a lot of backers like Ted Cruz and Jim Jordan, a lot of the folks who have a lot of juice on the right. Mowers had, a lot of the sort of the more, he had McCarthy and Scalise and all these guys. And I think that they thought that because they had been the nominee last time, they had all this backing that was what they're banking on. And anyway, it'll be interesting to see now whether Caroline Levitt at 25 can raise the money. She sort of had some interesting stuff to say about Speaker McCarthy on my show, that, because he had been for Mowers and kind of come out against her, that she wasn't sure she was going to support him. So it'll be interesting because that's a seat that's winnable. But, and I think a lot of times in politics you have to get over it. So we'll see. In Rhode Island, the governor, Dan McKee, became governor. He was lieutenant governor. He gained governor when Gino Raimondo became Commerce Secretary. So he's technically the incumbent, but this was his first run at the office. He had, like I said, been lieutenant governor for I think 6 years. Anyway, he barely won. I think it was 33%. There were 2 people coming up behind him, 2 progressives, the Secretary of State and this other woman who was a former CVS executive, Helena Foulkes. Collectively, I mean, he only won by less than 3 points. He had 33%. She had like 31 point something or 30 point something. Collectively, if one of them hadn't been running, he would have lost. I mean, the idea he barely won with a plurality. Obviously, he's favored to win. And then in the second congressional district, which if you're familiar with Rhode Island, it's big. It's like a big U, upside down U. And Providence is sort of the pinnacle. The left side of the state, the western side of the state, is the second congressional district. The right side of the state is the East Bay. That's the first congressional district. Anyway, Alan Fung is the former mayor of Cranston. He had run for governor twice, I think, and lost, but he is the Republican nominee. And the Democrats finally chose Seth Magaziner. He is the current state treasurer, and he's about as boring as paint dry. Anyway, Alan is, by all accounts on the public polling, he's up by anywhere from 5 to 10 points. And Kevin McCarthy's super PAC has dumped $1 million. That's a lot of money in Rhode Island. Anyway, it'll be really interesting there. The media is really trying to make this a story about how Republicans are losing ground. I just don't see it. It's a nice narrative when you look at national polls, but in a midterm election, you got to go race by race. And race by race, I think Republicans are doing just fine. I think they'll do 15 to 20 seats in the House, which gets them well above the majority. I mean, they need 5. I think they'll get 15, 20, potentially more. And just to keep some stuff in context, redistricting has made it such that there's only so much in play. You've unlike years past, a lot of these seats are locked in. They're either a hard Republican or hard Democrat. So there's only so many seats you can actually compete in anymore. And I've been covering this in the last couple episodes, but the Senate race, I mentioned the one in New Hampshire, they keep going in the direction of the Republican. So, I actually think Republicans end up potentially +2, 51, 52 seats. I like where Arizona is. I like where Ohio is. Georgia is performing very well. Where, by the way, if you're interested in seeing some of these candidates, we're going to try to have all of them on Spicer and Company next week, all the top ones anyway. But Herschel's going in the right direction in Georgia. And then there's races in Colorado. You got Joe O'Dea. I mentioned New Hampshire, where there's a shot. And so I actually think at the end of the day, inflation's still above 8%. People are not happy. And so I'm saying, I still think that if you look at it race by race, which is how this has got to be run, Republicans are still doing much better than they need to be doing. As an FYI, this Friday, House Republicans are going to roll out what they call a commitment to America in Pennsylvania. I've actually had a chance to talk to Kevin McCarthy about this, get an idea of like what his strategy is going to be. But on Friday, they're going to pop this thing out. There's been leaks about it. It's got like 4 main kind of headings, if you will, keeping America safe and da-da-da-da. But then there's these subheadings. And the thing that's going to be interesting is that they're not just going to be like a one and done. They want to take this show on the road, if you will, bring it around the country in the next 50 days before the election, try to keep some momentum going on. Look, it's interesting. I was there. I was part of a campaign that ran during the Contract with America in 1994. There's a lot of revisionist history about the contract. What I will tell you is that it's good that the Republicans have something to talk about. And so anyway, keep an eye on that. We'll obviously break it all down next Monday, but that's what's going to happen on Friday. I want to move on to immigration. This thing with DeSantis has been unbelievable. So he sent 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard, okay? And you would have thought the world blew up. I mean, it was unbelievable. There's 2,000 people crossing into the country legally on any given day at some of these border crossings. We're over 2 million people coming in. And the people in Martha's Vineyard who have a sign that hangs up saying, "We welcome all people, we welcome immigrants and refugees," and whatever, they couldn't handle 50 people. This is a joke. The ferry goes in and out of there multiple times a day, bringing hundreds of people. And as long as they can pay, it wasn't until they suddenly faced reality that these libs in Martha's Vineyard suddenly said that they couldn't handle them. All these other states are handling 2,000 a day. And the people in Martha's Vineyard who love to hang their flags out and their signs up that say, "Oh, we love everybody and we welcome everybody." Apparently, they can't welcome 50 people. They have to ship them off real quick. What about, think about all these hotels and inns that are packed to the gills for 12 weeks during summer. Suddenly they can't handle 50 people? Really? It's so amazing that a week ago, that place was buzzing, you know? And they freak out now, and everybody's going, oh my God. Think about this. What did DeSantis do? He got a lot of people to pay attention, I'll tell you that. But every day, the Biden administration is getting these people on secret planes and buses and moving around the country. DeSantis just did it with a lot more flair. And you got these people in Texas, in D.C. and Chicago, Lightfoot and Muriel Bowser here in D.C. They're like whining. They get a couple hundred people, and they're like, we need the National Guard to come in. We need this and that. It's like, wait a second. You have no problem telling everybody else how to handle illegal immigration, preaching about sanctuary cities and all this stuff until you get a couple hundred. What about Arizona? What about Texas? What about Florida? All these places that have been dealing with this on a daily basis for years, and you didn't seem to care at all. And now it's amazing. They show up outside of Kamala Harris's house. They put 50 people there, and everybody freaks out. God forbid she might actually have to talk to somebody and understand what's going on. The root cause, as she likes to say. The root cause. But she hasn't talked to the president of Guatemala in like a year. The reality is the press literally turns this all about what DeSantis is doing as opposed to what the Biden administration is not doing. The border is not secure. We don't know who's coming to this country. We know that drugs are coming in. We know that human traffickers are coming in. We know that horrible things are happening to these individuals. If you care about these people, then you should care about stopping what's going on, because what's happening is this is a big magnet, and as they come up from places like Venezuela, they are raped, they are trafficked, all sorts of bad things are happening to them. No one seems to care about that, but that's only happening because they believe that they're being welcome here in the United States. Unbelievable. And it's just, again, I was listening to some of the Sunday shows. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's like, suddenly it's like, oh, this is all the Republicans' fault. The Democrats control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and it's the Republicans' fault? Give me a break. These guys in the media are so complicit, and we'll do everything to cover for them. It's unreal. All right, I want to move on to this special master issue. It's fascinating to me, two things. So each side got to submit two names in the Trump Mar-a-Lago thing about who would review these classified documents, etc. And one of the two names that the Trump team put up for was this guy, Raymond Dieri, appointed by Reagan, but by all accounts, a pretty straight shooter. On the one hand, you would say, oh, that's a big win. Like, the Justice Department said, great, we'll take Dieri. And so you think, okay, this is a big win. You start looking into him, and by all accounts, this guy is not a pro-Trump attorney. So what was the goal here? I've brought this up on the show. I've been asking some of the guests, Alan Dershowitz, Matt Whitaker, the former AG, are they going to regret this? Because they own this. This was their pick. They had two people to choose. Each side did. And this is one of the two that Team Trump put forward. So you can't then turn around and say, oh, this guy's horrible, he's a partisan, whatever. You chose him. So I don't know him. But I've read enough now that I am going to be very interested to see if these guys have regret about who they chose, a week or a month or whatever down the road. It's also interesting because you've seen a lot of stories in the past, I guess it's about 72 hours, about a lot of squabbling on the team. And, that's not that atypical for Team Trump, right? We all have seen the stories. Whenever it happens, it's, there's always a palace intrigue in terms of somebody sniping with others. But it's not good when your lawyers are not getting along and a lot's at stake. And that's what I think is going to be fascinating. And so the knives are definitely out for some of these guys. And again, I think that just makes the DOJ smile because they're sitting here going, okay, guys, you guys keep going after each other. But we haven't heard the last of this. It's going to be interesting to see how much further this thing goes. Turning to the media, a lot to break down here. I mentioned immigration. This week, the show on ABC, their Sunday show, was guest anchored by John Carl. And it literally turned into an infomercial for open borders. He had two mayors, Mayor Adams from New York, Democrat, and the mayor of El Paso, who just talked about their policies and why Republicans were bad. And again, they're the Democrats, they're the Democratic mayors, Democratic Congress, Democratic president, and yet it's the Republicans' problem. Fascinating. And by the way, you have a Democratic governor in New York too. I mean, like everything is, and you got Mayor Adams, who's the mayor of New York, and they're saying, "Oh my God, I got a busload of migrants." I mean, think about how many people come into Port Authority or to Grand Central Station, and they can't handle 50 people. Are you serious? Give me a break. I mean, this is such a joke. Either he's that incompetent, or you know, this is a pretty pathetic. But then there were no other guests that supported that were Republicans, and there's plenty to do it. Think about it. I mean, we have them on the show all the time. Every night there's somebody. They couldn't find one person. I mean, it's you have to stop and understand though. This is the reason that I like to talk about this. How so many people get their news is that it's like stuff didn't happen in the world that John Carl and ABC and Chuck Todd and NBC live in. Certain things just don't occur. Biden all good, nothing's wrong, everything good, Republicans bad. They don't even show you the other side. There wasn't one person that could argue for that, make that case. They didn't have another mayor, they didn't have a congressman on, they didn't have anybody from the last administration. They had Mark Short on, I will say that, on this week, who represents former Vice President Pence. But it was unbelievable about how everything, it was all about how DeSantis was so bad. And what they did was good. But the only reason that we're in any of this predicament is because Joe Biden changed the policies. We knew how to keep people out. We knew how to keep Remain in Mexico in place. And yet they undid it all. And now it's like, okay, well, here's what DeSantis is doing. Okay, what about all those people who can't go to school or who can't keep their business open, or if people traipse through their homes or their property down in Texas or Arizona, whatever, and no one cares about them? The Border Patrol has their hands tied. ICE can't do anything to get rid of people. And they get, that gets no attention. DeSantis does one stunt and it's like, oh my God. It was unbelievable. Anyway, and Meet the Press was horrible as well. I mean, it literally was a completely one-sided discussion about everything that's going on. There was an interesting story in Time magazine by a guy named Phil Elliott, who claims to be a reporter. And he wrote this story about, if DeSantis's thing is true, then what does it say about America? And I kept thinking to myself, you have to read this. It shouldn't take long to Google it. And he's complaining about how he is so tough to write this story. These are people who claim to be reporters, non-biased journalists, and he's writing about how DeSantis is such a bad guy, and this stunt was horrible, and da-da-da-da. And it's like, that's not reporting. I don't think they care. So anyway, it was unbelievable. Little news coming out of CNN, by the way. They announced they're doing a new morning show. This is something that Chris Litt, the new president of CNN, has been talking about pretty much even before he officially started. I think he used the phrase reimagining our morning show. Well, he announces that John Bertman and Breonna Keeler are out, no surprise. But then he's putting in this team, including, I think it's Poppy Harlow, Caitlin Collins, who was a former White House reporter, and Don Lemon. I mean, who wants to wake up to Don Lemon? It's hard enough at whatever he's on, 10 o'clock at night. I kind of thought he was one of the ones that was going to go. But then you move him to the morning? I don't know that people want that in your face kind of thing first thing in the morning. I'm intrigued that that's the direction they went. But I mean, I really thought that after sort of getting rid of a few of these guys, they got rid of John Harwood, they got rid of Brian Stelter, they got rid of Jeffrey Tubin. They were heading at least in the right direction. And I don't know. I did not see that one coming, that you would throw him in there. Because there was a rumor that he really wanted to sort of make this new morning show thing. And I just don't see Don Lemon the kind of guy that you want to wake up to. But we'll see. And we'll see how it lasts. President Biden was on 60 Minutes last night, in case you missed it. Holy smokes. First of all, I joked about this on Twitter, but if there's a softball shortage this morning, it's because Scott Pelley took them all for his interview. It was horrible. I mean, Scott Pelley used to be a real journalist, and last night it was almost like uh, it was kind of sad watching him interview Biden because there was it was one softball after another and one attempt to kind of help him. Um, so a couple things that were interesting out of that. Number one, he got asked again about China and Taiwan. This is like the 80th time this has happened. And so Pelley says, okay, if China goes into Taiwan, are you willing to commit U.S. military to intervene? And Biden says yes. That's not U.S. policy. That's why it matters. Well, they literally note that after the interview, a White House aide came to clarify the position. That has now happened. I'm not kidding. I think it's 4 times where the president has said the same thing and then walked it back. But I just don't get it. And by the way, one of the next questions was about, I think Pelley asked it about his mental, I forgot how he phrased it. It was basically his cognitive ability. And I'm thinking, look at the 2 questions. You just asked him about U.S. policy. You couldn't even answer the question. But Biden's answer was basically this. Look at my schedule. If you want to keep up with me. And I'm like, dude, your schedule has nothing on it ever. You basically get up around 11 o'clock, you get the president's daily briefing. I'm not really sure that was the best defense. Look at my schedule. Okay. He also made some news about his reelection. And he definitely, he tried to couch it in, I can't say much because, if I said I was running the FEC, which is true, there is an element of that. But he's gone farther than he did last night, and he seemed to walk it back saying, no, it is my intention, but I haven't made up my mind. I don't think that was it did not, if you're a candidate or an operative that was looking for a tell on whether or not he was going to run, last night was the tell that he's not going to run. So I'm just going to tell you right now, like, there's no question in my mind last night what he was basically saying is, I'm not running. So just mark that down. He also, at the beginning of the interview, he tried to make the case that, like, inflation wasn't bad, and Scott Pelley's like, it's the highest in 40 years. And he's like, I know, but, it's been that way for, like, 3 months. It's like, okay, so it sucked for a lot, like, just because it's not getting worse isn't a good thing to cheer about. What a dumb thing to say. He literally was going back at Scott Pelley, it wasn't a tough question. It was just, hey, this isn't good. And he's like, yeah, but it's been about the same for 3 months. And it's like, yeah, 8.3%, the highest in 40 years. And you're basically saying, hey, but it's not getting horribly worse. I just, that shows a level of tone deafness that was pretty unbelievable. That kind of leads into the last thing, which is that, there was this inflation report, the CPI, they call it, last week. It's unbelievable because they passed this bill called the Inflation Reduction Act. They literally had a party at the White House on the day the inflation report comes out. Now, can I just tell you this? From a planning standpoint, I've done a ton of events over my career where you're staging something for the cameras and getting supporters or whatever. Who didn't look at the calendar and say, God, the inflation report comes out that day. We're really gambling. What a bunch of dum-dums. So they have it on the day the inflation report comes out, and guess what? It ticked up. Food is at the highest it's been in like 29 years. The stock market literally crashed. I think it was the 6th worst day. NASDAQ, S&P, New York Stock Exchange. And they got James Taylor out there on the White House lawn thinking fire and rain. Honest to God. But no one said this probably doesn't look good. Holy smokes. And you got the AP out there, the Associated Press, putting out headlines like, inflation dropped for the 2nd month in a row, which is not true. It didn't drop. It actually ticked up 0.1. These guys, it is just unbelievable what's happening right now in terms of the economy. And you've got the President of the United States being like, yo, Jack, it's not that big of a deal. For so many Americans, it is a big deal. Everything that they buy is up, 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 up. Wages haven't kept up with it. And he's like, look at how many jobs I created, we created. You didn't create anything. The government doesn't create jobs unless they're literally government jobs. He's acting like somehow he's been doing all this great stuff. I just was dumbfounded. But the thing is that when you can do an interview and know that you're not going to get held accountable, which is frankly what he had last night on CBS, why not? You know, the staff's like, okay, it's not like we're going to get in trouble. Anyway, so much good stuff. We're going to have a lot, as I mentioned, next. We have a great guest coming up on Thursday. But on Monday, I think we'll have a lot to talk about because of this commitment to America and where we are on some of these key issues. So look forward to catching back up with you on Monday. Again, thank you for everyone who's subscribing and sharing. Bumped into someone the other day who says they really enjoyed the podcast and they've been referred to by someone else. So thank you for those of you who not only listen and subscribe and review and all that, which is greatly appreciated, but also to those people who are sharing it with someone, because that's the word of mouth, man. That's still key. Anyway, until Thursday, thanks for being here. I'll see you then.